The whisper that killed an empire today. I am going to tell you a story about a man who never wore a crown. Yet kings trembled at his footsteps. A man who changed the fate of empires with nothing more than a whisper and a vial of poison. His name was Bagoas, a court eunuch, the silent voice behind the throne, the architect of an empire's destruction. But here is what history books won. Tell you, this man didn't just kill kings. He killed something far more dangerous, the very soul of a civilization. And by the time anyone realized what he'd done, it was already too late. The Golden Cage, picture this. Persia at its zenith. The year is somewhere around 340 BCE. Artaxerxes III, called Ocus by those who dared speak his name, sits upon the peacock throne. Egypt, ancient, proud, unconquerable Egypt, now bows to Persian satraps. Rebellions from the Mediterranean to the Hindu Kush have been crushed with such brutality that mothers frighten their children with stories of Persian retribution. The treasury of Susa groans under the weight of tribute gold. Silk roots pulse like arteries, feeding the heart of the greatest empire the world has ever seen. The palace at Persepolis is a symphony of power. Frankincense smoke curls through halls where Cyrus once walked. Mastic resin perfumes the air, so thick you can taste wealth on your tongue. Guards stand at every corner, their spears catching torchlight like frozen lightning. In the throne room, tributaries from 100 nations kneel before the King of Kings, Lord of the four corners of the earth, shadow of Ahura Mazda himself. But pay attention now, because in the shadows behind these glittering columns, there moves a figure that kings ignore at their peril. Not a general, not a prince, not even a nobleman, a eunuch, keeper of the Royal Bedchamber, master of whispers. His name is Bagoas, and while you've probably never heard of him, his fingerprints are all over the map you learned in school. Watch him closely, see how he moves through the palace, like smoke, like shadow. He doesn't stride, he glides. When he passes, conversations stop, not because he demands it, but because everyone knows. Those who speak too freely in his presence have a habit of dying in their sleep. The architecture of fear. Let me tell you something about power that your teachers never explained. Real power, the kind that shapes civilizations, doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It doesn't need an army at its back. Real power lives in the space between what is said and what is understood. In the pause before someone answers a question. In the careful choice of who sits next to whom at dinner. Bagoas understood this better than any man alive. He wasn't born to privilege. Sources suggest he came from a noble Persian family, but fate, or perhaps ambition, led him into service as a eunuch. In ancient Persia, this wasn't necessarily degradation. Eunuchs could rise to positions of immense influence precisely because they posed no dynastic threat. They could father children, couldn't found rival houses. Kings trusted them with intimacy that made even brothers dangerous. But here is what makes Bagoas different. What makes his story worth your time. He didn't just accept his position. He weaponized it. Think about the information a bedchamber keeper possesses. He knows who visits the king at night. He knows which concubines are favored and which are forgotten. He knows when the king sleeps poorly, when he drinks too much, when he confides fears he never voice in the throne room. He controls access, and in a world before electronic communication, before even reliable mail, access is everything. Bagoas took this advantage and built something unprecedented, an intelligence network that would make modern spy agencies envious. Every servant in the palace owed him something. Every guard had been promoted through his recommendation. Every physician, every food taster, every minor official. They all understood that their position depended not on the king's favor, but on Bagoas' tolerance. And here is where it gets chilling. He used knowledge the way a master swordsman uses a blade, precisely, economically, never revealing how much he knew, always implying he knew more. Imagine being a Persian noble in that court. You are plotting, nothing serious, just normal court intrigue, perhaps angling for a better satrapy. One morning, Bagoas passes you in a corridor. He doesn't stop, doesn't speak, but he looks at you, just a glance, a flicker of recognition, And in that moment you realize he knows. Maybe he knows everything. Maybe he knows nothing. But you can take the risk. So you abandon your plans. You become careful. You become compliant. That is not power through violence. That is power through psychology, and it is far more effective. The first death Artaxerxes III dies in 338 BCE. The official records are vague, as official records always are when important men die inconveniently. Some ancient sources mention illness. Others speak more carefully of natural causes, but whispers spread through the empire, like wildfire in dry grass. And every whisper carries the same name, Bagoas now. Stay with me here, because this is where the story becomes more than just ancient gossip. This is where we see a pattern that will repeat itself throughout history, in every culture, in every age. The question isn't did Bagoas poison the king? The question is, why didn't anyone stop him? And the answer reveals something terrifying about how power really works. By the time Artaxerxes III died, Bagoas had spent decades building his web of influence. Every official who might have investigated was either in his debt or terrified of his reach. The royal physicians, he placed them in their positions. The food tasters, loyal to him. The king's sons, too busy competing with each other to notice the eunuch threading between them like a spider. Here is what keeps me up at night about this story, in an empire of millions, with armies that could darken the sky with arrows, with a bureaucracy that stretched from Greece to India, one man without soldiers, without weapons, without even the ability to produce heirs. One such man could kill the most powerful ruler on earth and face no consequences. Why? Because he made himself indispensable. Because he ensured that any investigation would lead to someone's ally, someone's patron, someone who had too much to lose. He created a system where everyone was complicit, even if they never conspired to anything. Think about that. Really think about it. How many modern institutions operate on the same principle? The boy king Artaxerxes IV, known as Arses, takes the throne at perhaps 20 years old. Imagine being that age and inheriting an empire that spans 3 million square miles. Your father is barely cold, and already satraps are sending messages, testing your resolve. Tributary states are wondering if they need to pay tribute to a boy. Generals twice your age are waiting to see if you command them or beg them. You need help. You need guidance. You need someone who knows how the palace works, who understands the machinery of power. And standing right beside you, ready to help, is Bagoas. The contemporary sources paint Arses as weak. But I wonder about that. I wonder if he was weak, or if he was simply young and trapped. Because here is what the historical record shows. Within months of taking the throne, Arses began trying to assert independence from Bagoas' influence. Maybe he discovered something. Maybe someone loyal to his father told him the truth about how Artaxerxes III really died. Maybe he simply grew tired of having every decision advised by a eunuch who seemed to always be there, always be listening, always be suggesting. Whatever the reason, Arses made the fatal mistake of showing his hand too early. Picture the scene, a young king trying to reclaim his authority, starting to ask dangerous questions. Who poisoned my father? Why do all the palace officials defer to a eunuch? Why do I give orders that somehow get modified before they reach my generals? And Bagoas, watching this unfold with the patience of a man who has played this game for decades, realizes this king won. Bend. This king is too curious, too honest, too naive to accept the comfortable lie of shared power. So he makes a decision, not in anger. Men like Bagoas don't act in anger, in calculation. 2 years after taking the throne, Arses dies. Again, the sources are vague. Again, whispers fill the palace. But this time, something's different. This time, people aren't just whispering about the death. They re-whispering about the pattern. 2 kings in 3 years, both dead under mysterious circumstances, both with the same man standing in the shadows of their throne. And here is where the story takes a turn that should make every student of power sit up and pay attention, despite everyone knowing, or at least suspecting, what Bagoas has done. No one moves against him. No one calls for investigation. No one demands justice. Why? Because Bagoas has created something more powerful than military force. He has created a system of mutual fear and mutual complicity. Every official who might oppose him has benefited from his influence. Every nobleman has used his networks. Every general has accepted his recommendations. They not Bagoas' allies, they his hostages, and the ransom is their silence. This is the genius of corruption. Once everyone's hands are dirty, no one can point fingers without pointing at themselves. The warrior king, now Bagoas, faces a problem. He has eliminated 2 kings, but he still needs a king. The Achaemenid dynasty stretches back 2 centuries. Its legitimacy is woven into the fabric of the empire. You can just declare yourself ruler. Even Bagoas understands that. Besides, being the power behind the throne is safer than being on it. Visible power attracts arrows. Invisible power attracts only whispers, and whispers can kill, unless you are the one controlling them. So Bagoas makes what seems like his first real mistake. He chooses Darius. Darius Achaemenid is about 45 when he is offered the throne. He is not a prince. He is a distant cousin of the royal line, distant enough that he has had to make his own way. And how has he made it? Through military service. He has fought on the eastern frontiers. He has put down rebellions. Stories circulate about his personal courage. Once, challenged to single combat by a massive warrior from a tributary tribe, Darius stepped forward when no other Persian noble would, and killed the champion with his own hands. This is not Arses. This is not a boy. This is a man who understands violence, who has commanded armies, who has looked death in the face and didn't blink. And here is the critical detail that changes everything. Darius is smart enough to know exactly what Bagoas has done to the previous 2 kings. Imagine being in Darius' position. You are being offered the most powerful throne in the world. But everyone knows that the last 2 men who sat on it are dead, and the man offering it to you killed them. It is like being handed a golden crown and watching the headsman sharpen his axe in the background. So why does Darius accept? Because he thinks he can win. Because unlike Arses, he has a power base outside the palace. His soldiers are loyal to him personally. He has spent years building relationships with military commanders who respect competence over courtly intrigue. He is not some sheltered prince who has spent his life learning to read Persian and Greek. He is a warrior who has earned his authority in blood. Darius accepts the crown, but he accepts it knowing exactly what game he is playing. And for the first time in perhaps 20 years, Bagoas faces someone who can be controlled through whispers and poison alone. The silent war, what happens next, is one of the most fascinating power struggles in ancient history, and it is almost entirely invisible to the historical record. No battles, no proclamations, no public confrontations. Just 2 men, circling each other in the shadows of the greatest palace on earth, each trying to destroy the other without creating a scandal that could topple the empire. Darius begins carefully. He can simply arrest Bagoas. The eunuch's networks are too deep, his influence too widespread. Arrest him, and you risk alienating half your court. Execute him, and you might find yourself drinking poisoned wine the next evening, courtesy of servants whose true loyalties you underestimated. Instead, Darius starts promoting his own people. Slowly, officers from his military campaigns start appearing in palace positions. Satraps who were loyal to the previous regime find themselves replaced by men who owe everything to the new king and nothing to Bagoas. It is surgical, precise. Each move looks reasonable on its own, but the pattern is clear. The web of influence that took Bagoas decades to build is being systematically dismantled, and Bagoas feels it, like a spider sensing disturbance in its web. He knows something has changed. For the first time in his career, his whispers aren't being heeded. His recommendations are being politely received and quietly ignored. Officials who once sought his favor now answer summons directly from the king without asking Bagoas' permission first. But here is the thing about men who held power through fear. They don't know how to let go gracefully. They don't know how to retire. They only know how to escalate. Bagoas has killed 2 kings. From his perspective, what is one more? Especially one who is clearly trying to destroy everything he has built. He begins preparations, somewhere in the palace, maybe the kitchens, maybe a trusted physician's chambers. Poison is being prepared. The same poison that killed Artaxerxes III and Arses. A poison that Bagoas has perfected over decades, tasteless, leaving symptoms that mimic natural illness impossible to trace. But this time, something goes wrong. Maybe one of Bagoas' own network, sensing the shifting winds of power, betrays him. Maybe Darius has been more thorough in his purge than the eunuch realized. Maybe someone simply makes a mistake, a whispered conversation overheard, a suspicious purchase noticed. However it happens, Darius learns of the plot, and now he faces the moment every leader dreads, the moment when you have to act decisively, knowing that hesitation means death, but action might trigger chaos. The fatal cup picture the scene, and yes, I am reconstructing this because the ancient sources give us only the outline. But stay with me, because whether this is exactly how it happened or not, this is how such things unfold. A private chamber, not the throne room. That would be too public, too risky. Somewhere in the palace where a king can meet with a court official without dozens of witnesses. Darius is there. Bagoas is summoned. Maybe Bagoas thinks he is finally being consulted again. Maybe he thinks he has regained some of his influence. Maybe he is wary, but not wary enough. Darius is direct. He is a military man, not a courtier. He doesn't play word games. He tells Bagoas he knows about the poison. He tells him that this time there will be no mystery, no convenient illness. And then he does something brilliant and terrible. He forces Bagoas to drink his own poison. Think about the symbolism of that moment. Think about what Darius is saying, not just to Bagoas, but to every official, every courtier, every servant who has watched this shadow game play out for years. He is saying, the age of whispers is over. The age of hidden power is done. In my court, authority flows from the throne, not from the shadows behind it. Bagoas drinks. Of course he drinks. What choice does he have? He is alone with the king, and outside the door are the king, guards, men loyal to the warrior who promoted them, not to the eunuch who ruled through fear. Maybe it is quick. Maybe it is slow. The sources don't tell us. But Bagoas, the man who decided the fate of kings, who held an empire in his palm, who whispered empires into existence and dissolution. Bagoas dies without ceremony, without dignity, poisoned by his own weapon, justice, perhaps, necessary. Certainly. But here is what should terrify you about this story. By the time Darius executes Bagoas, it is already too late. The poison that remained Bagoas is dead. The palace should breathe easier. The new king has proven himself strong, decisive, capable of rooting out corruption. The system should reset, like a body recovering after a tumor is removed, but empires aren't bodies. They more like ecosystems. And when you remove a keystone species, even a poisonous one, the whole system can collapse. Here is what Darius does, to understand, what perhaps no one could have understood without the benefit of hindsight. Bagoas didn't just control people. He fundamentally changed how the Persian Empire functioned. For decades under his influence, the empire had learned to run on fear and whispers. Officials didn't make decisions based on policy or principle. They made them based on what they thought Bagoas wanted. Satraps didn't administer their provinces efficiently. They administered them in ways that would keep the eunuch's favor. Generals didn't serve the empire. They served the network that could promote or destroy them. Bagoas had, quite literally, trained an entire generation of Persian leadership to be passive, to wait for instructions, to cover their backs first and serve the empire second. And now he is gone. The officials who learned to operate in his shadow suddenly don't know how to operate at all. Satraps who once communicated through his network now find those channels closed and don't know how to talk to each other directly. Generals who coordinated through intermediaries don't know how to coordinate at all. Darius issues orders from Persepolis. They reach the Western satraps weeks late, passed through layers of bureaucrats who used to check every decree against what Bagoas' people thought it should say. By the time these orders arrive, they garbled, confused, sometimes contradictory. The empire is paralyzed, not because anyone is actively sabotaging it, but because the machinery of government has forgotten how to work without its hidden engine. And then, in the spring of 336 BCE, news arrives from the west that changes everything. King Philip II of Macedon is dead, assassinated. His 20-year-old son Alexander has taken the throne. Most of Darius' advisors breathe easier. Macedon had been a growing threat under Philip, but surely this boy king won to be able to hold his father's coalition together. Surely the Greek states will rebel. Surely this is a reprieve, a chance for Persia to stabilize before facing external threats. But Darius, the old soldier, the man who understands warfare, feels something different. He feels dread, because he recognizes in Alexander something he saw in himself, a warrior who leads from the front, who makes decisions quickly, who doesn't wait for permission from courtiers and advisors. And Darius knows, though he probably could articulate why, that in the coming conflict, speed will matter more than size, decision making will matter more than resources, unity of command will matter more than numerical advantage. And Persia, despite its millions of subjects, its uncounted wealth, its vast armies, has just spent decades learning to be slow, bureaucratic, and fragmented. The storm from the west. Alexander crosses into Asia in 334 BCE. He has perhaps 40,000 soldiers. Persia can field armies 10 times that size. But here is where numbers stop mattering. At the Battle of Granicus River, Alexander leads a cavalry charge personally. He is in the front rank, fighting like a common soldier, taking risks that make his generals pull their hair out. His orders are simple: follow me, attack there, now. The Persian satraps defending the river are competent. They experienced, they have good troops. But when the battle reaches its critical moment, they pause. They wait for instructions from higher authority. They try to coordinate with each other through messengers and conferences. They do everything Bagoas system taught them to do. Be careful. Cover your position. Make sure someone else is responsible if things go wrong. And while they repausing, Alexander's cavalry smashes through their center. Persia loses the battle not because its soldiers are worse, they not, but because its system is designed for a different kind of war. A war where armies move slowly, campaigns last years, and success goes to whoever can outlast the other through superior logistics and resources. But Alexander isn't fighting that war. He is fighting a war of speed, surprise, and personal valor. And every day he moves deeper into Persian territory. The empire's paralysis becomes more obvious. Darius gathers the main Persian army. It is enormous. Ancient sources claim hundreds of thousands, though modern historians think maybe 100,000. Either way, it vastly outnumbers Alexander's forces. They meet at Issus in 333 BCE. And here we see how completely Bagoas' legacy has crippled the empire. Darius positions his army in a narrow coastal plain, tactically questionable. But he has had conflicting advice from multiple generals, none of whom want to be blamed for a wrong decision. His battle line is huge but unwieldy. His command structure is Byzantine, layers of authority, no one quite sure who is supposed to give orders to whom. Alexander's command structure is simple. Alexander gives orders, everyone else follows them. That is it. When the battle begins, it is chaos. Parts of the Persian line fight bravely. Some Greek mercenaries in Persian service actually push Alexander's troops back. But there is no coordination, no flexibility. When opportunities arise, no Persian commander feels authorized to exploit them without orders. When threats emerge, response is delayed by the need to relay messages up and down the chain of command. And then Alexander does what Alexander always does. He finds where Darius is positioned, and he charges directly at him. Think about what this means. Alexander is supposed to be commanding an army. He is supposed to be in the rear, safe, directing movements like a chess player. Instead, he is leading a wedge of cavalry in a suicidal charge directly at the Persian center, directly at the King of Kings himself. It is insane. It is brilliant, and it works. Darius' guards fight bravely, but the surprise is complete. Nobody expected the enemy commander to personally charge the Persian king. In the confusion, someone, a guard, an advisor, a general, makes a decision: get Darius out of there. and Darius, the brave warrior who once killed a champion in single combat, flees now. Was this cowardice? Historians debate it. Maybe his advisors forced him to flee for political reasons. A dead king means the end of the dynasty. Maybe it was sound tactics, preserve the monarch to fight another day. Maybe, having just killed Bagoas a few years ago, Darius had enemies at court who were more afraid of what would happen if he survived a defeat than if he died heroically. But here is what matters. The King of Kings fled a battlefield, and in a culture where the king is supposed to be the empire personified, where his presence legitimizes everything, where his word is literally law, his flight breaks something fundamental. The Persian army doesn't just lose the battle, it disintegrates. Soldiers who were fighting bravely moments before suddenly stop fighting. Commanders flee, satraps abandon their posts. It is not a retreat, it is a psychological collapse. And in Darius' abandoned camp, Alexander finds the Persian king's family, his mother, his wife, his daughters. He treats them with respect and honor, which is good politics. But the symbolic message is devastating. The conqueror has captured the empire, heart before he has conquered the empire, territory. The long-collapsed Darius escapes and tries to rebuild. He is still technically the King of Kings. He still has vast resources. Most of the empire still officially recognizes his authority. He gathers another army, even larger than the last one. But everything takes too long. Messages between satraps get confused. Some provinces aren't sure who is in charge. Others hesitate to commit resources, afraid of backing the wrong side. The bureaucracy that Bagoas spent decades building to serve his interests has forgotten how to serve anyone's interests efficiently. In 331 BCE, at Gaugamela, Darius and Alexander meet for the last time. The Persian army is massive, perhaps the largest army ever assembled up to that point. It outnumbers Alexander's forces perhaps 3 or 4 to 1. Darius has learned from Isis. He has chosen an open battlefield where his numbers will matter. He has even had the ground leveled to give his war chariots maximum advantage. But the fundamental problem remains. The Persian system is designed for consensus and caution, while Alexander's is designed for speed and audacity. When the battle begins, parts of the Persian strategy work. The flanks hold. Some units perform brilliantly. But there is no adaptive response. When Alexander creates opportunities through unconventional tactics, no Persian commander feels authorized to respond without orders. When threats emerge, the response is delayed by the need to coordinate through multiple levels of command. And once again, Alexander finds a gap, leads a charge personally, and drives toward Darius. Once again, Darius flees. This time, there is no rebuilding. This time, even Darius' closest advisors know it is over. The king who fled twice can command an empire built on divine authority. Darius retreats east, trying to reach the empire, Sartland, trying to find somewhere he can regroup. But his own satraps turn against him. Not because they support Alexander, they don't but because they no longer trust a system that has proven itself broken. In 330 BCE, in Bactria, the third is murdered by his own general, Bessus. It is not even assassination for power. Bessus doesn't make himself king. It is simply the final act of an empire that has forgotten how to function, turning on itself in confusion and desperation. The ghost in the machine, Alexander conquers the whole empire. He marches into Persepolis, Susa, Babylon. All the great capitals fall without protracted sieges. Why? Because the administrative system that should be coordinating defense has collapsed. Because satraps are more afraid of being blamed for failure than they are of being conquered. Because an empire that learned to operate through whispers and fear has discovered that without someone to whisper instructions, it doesn't know how to operate at all. Now here is what haunts me about this story. Here is why I wanted to spend this time taking you through every detail. Historians usually explain the fall of the Achaemenid Empire in military terms. Alexander was a genius general, which he was. His tactics were innovative, which they were. Philip had reformed the Macedonian army into an unstoppable machine, which he had. The Sarissa phalanx, the companion cavalry, the combined arms approach, all of this matters. But I think they were missing something crucial. I think the Persian Empire was already dead before Alexander crossed into Asia. It died when Darius forced Bagoas to drink poison. Or maybe it died years earlier, when Bagoas killed his first king. Or perhaps it died slowly, over decades, as an entire civilization learned that fear was more important than competence, that knowing the right people mattered more than knowing the right answer, that survival meant waiting for instructions rather than taking initiative. Bagoas didn't. He just killed kings. He killed the empire's ability to function without him. He created a system so dependent on his networks, so used to operating through fear and whispers, that when he was removed, the whole structure collapsed. Think about modern institutions, you know. Think about organizations where everyone is afraid to make decisions without checking with someone higher up, where covering your back matters more than getting the job done, where unofficial power networks matter more than official hierarchy, where truth is less important than what the important people believe. That is Bagoas' legacy. That is the poison he left behind. The moral of the story: Darius III gets a bad reputation in history. Historians call him weak, cowardly, the king who lost an empire. But I don't think that is fair. I think Darius was a capable soldier, a brave man, someone who tried desperately to reform a broken system. His mistake wasn't cowardice. His mistake was thinking that killing one man could fix a cultural problem. You can kill an institution. You can execute a culture. When Bagoas died, his methods didn't die with him. They been learned too well, practiced too long, embedded too deeply. Imagine being Darius. You've just executed the man who has secretly controlled the empire for decades. You think you've won. You think now you can rule properly. Honestly, openly. But every day you discover another way the system is broken. Officials who can make decisions without checking with someone who is no longer there. Satraps who can coordinate because the communication channels were all informal. Generals who hesitate because the old network of favor and fear has collapsed, and they don't know who to trust anymore. It is like trying to drive a car after removing the engine. The car looks intact. All the parts are there. But something fundamental is missing, and no amount of pushing can make it go. And then Alexander arrives. Alexander, who leads from the front, who makes decisions in seconds, who doesn't have a court culture, doesn't have generations of bureaucracy, doesn't have an empire to worry about maintaining. He just has an army and a goal and the ability to move faster than anyone thought possible. It is not a fair fight. It was never a fair fight. Not because of tactics or weapons, but because one side still knew how to make decisions and the other side had forgotten. Why this matters now, you might be wondering why I am spending so much time on ancient history. Why does a story about a Persian eunuch from 2,400 years ago matter? Because this pattern repeats, over and over, throughout history. In every culture, in every era, every time an institution learns to operate through fear instead of principle, it becomes fragile. Every time unofficial power networks replace official accountability, the system becomes vulnerable. Every time people learn to cover their backs instead of doing their jobs, collapse becomes inevitable. It is just a matter of when the external pressure arrives. Rome fell this way, not to barbarian hordes, but to its own internal paralysis, its inability to make hard decisions, its preference for comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. The Ming dynasty fell this way. An empire of millions, with resources beyond counting, collapsed because the eunuch bureaucracy had become so powerful, so removed from reality, that when the crisis came, no one knew how to respond. The Soviet Union fell this way. Not defeated in war, but simply stopped working, because a system built on fear and false reporting eventually forgets how to do anything else. And I watch modern institutions, corporations, governments, organizations of all kinds, and I see the same patterns emerging. The same preference for consensus over decision. The same fear of being wrong more than desire to be right. The same unofficial power networks that matter more than official authority. Bagoas' real poison wasn't the toxin that killed kings. It was the culture of fear and paralysis that infected an empire. And that poison is still being brewed in corridors of power all over the world. The man without a monument here is the final irony of Bagoas' story. He built nothing. No cities bear his name. No monuments commemorate his deeds. No coins carry his image. He commanded no armies. He won no battles. He wrote no laws. And yet his impact on history is profound. Because he killed an empire, not quickly, not obviously, but thoroughly. He taught a civilization to be afraid, to wait for instructions, to value position over performance. And when that civilization faced a real test, it shattered like glass. Sometimes I wonder what Bagoas thought in his final moments as he held that poisoned cup. Did he understand what he'd done? Did he realize that in destroying his enemies, he destroyed the empire itself? Did he grasp that his greatest victim wasn't Artaxerxes or Arses or even Darius, but Persia itself? Probably not. Men like Bagoas rarely see the big picture. They too focused on the immediate game, the current threat, the next move. They think in terms of people to eliminate and obstacles to overcome. They don't realize they dissolving the very foundation they stand on. And that might be the scariest part of this whole story. The greatest damage is rarely done by people who intend evil. It is done by people who are simply playing the game as they understand it, not realizing that their game is destroying the world around them. Your turn, so here is my question for you, dear viewer. Where do you see Bagoas in your world? Where do you see institutions that operate on fear instead of principle? Where do you see unofficial power networks that matter more than official accountability? Where do you see systems that have learned to be paralyzed, to wait for instructions, to cover backs instead of taking responsibility? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it? Because here is the thing about historical patterns. They only repeat if we let them. Every time someone chooses principle over convenience, truth over comfort, action over paralysis, they breaking the pattern. Every time someone refuses to play the whisper game, refuses to operate through fear, refuses to let unofficial power trump official authority, they rebuilding immunity to the poison that killed Persia. Bagoas' story is a warning, but warnings only matter if we heed them. The Persian Empire didn't fall to Alexander's army. It fell to its own internal decay, its own learned helplessness, its own cultural paralysis. Alexander just happened to arrive at the moment when the facade could no longer hide the rot beneath. Don't let your institutions, your organizations, your systems make the same mistake. Don't let whispers replace words. Don't let fear replace action. Don't let comfortable lies replace uncomfortable truths. Because empires don't fall from outside. They collapse from within, and the poison that kills them is always brewed in the shadows by people who think they too clever to be caught, until the day they forced to drink their own creation. Final thoughts. Thank you for staying with me through this long journey into ancient history. If you found value in this deep dive into power, corruption, and imperial collapse, please consider supporting this channel, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what empire or historical figure you'd like me to explore next. Because history isn't just a list of dates and battles. It is a pattern book for understanding power, how it is gained, how it is used, how it corrupts, and how it destroys. And the more we understand these patterns, the better equipped we are to recognize them in our own time. Bagoas never built a monument, but his shadow falls across history nonetheless, a reminder that the most dangerous power is the kind that operates in whispers, the kind that rules through fear, the kind that makes an empire forget how to function without it. Until next time, remember, those who shape history aren't always those who wear crowns. Sometimes they the ones standing in the shadows behind the throne, and sometimes their greatest achievement is their greatest crime.